The great bow of King Odysseus was not a ceremonial object. It was an instrument of war, crafted from thick animal horn and rigid wood, demanding brute, terrifying force to bend. One by one, the noblemen of Ithaca stepped forward to string it. One by one, the bow humiliated them. They greased the wood with hot tallow. They strained until the blood vessels in their necks swelled black. They tore the skin from their palms, but the wood would not yield. They had spent years eating the king's cattle, drinking his wine, and growing soft on his wealth. They had the arrogance of rulers, but the bodies of parasites. From his seat in the ashes by the heavy oak doors, the beggar watched them fail. When the last lord threw the bow to the stone floor in frustration, the beggar stood. He stepped forward and asked to test the wood. The great hall erupted in vicious laughter. Antinous, the cruelest of the suitors, threatened to have the old man's ears cut off for his insolence. But Telemachus, the young prince, coldly ordered the bow to be handed to the stranger. The lord sneered as the beggar took the weapon. He did not rush. He turned the bow in his dirty hands, inspecting it for rot or wormholes, moving with a calm, terrifying familiarity. Then, without straining, without a single wasted motion, he bent the great horn. He slipped the loop of the bowstring into its notch. He plucked the taut string, and it sang in the quiet hall with a sharp, lethal sound, like the cry of a swallow. The laughter died in the throats of the suitors. The color drained from their faces. The beggar picked up a bronze-tipped arrow, laid it across the grip, and drew the string back to his chest. He did not stand. Still seated, he released. The arrow hissed through the room, passing cleanly through the iron rings of 12 axe heads lined up in the center of the hall, burying itself in the solid oak door at the far end. Odysseus stood up. He stripped the filthy rags from his shoulders. "The test is over," he said. Before the men could fully understand the trap they were in, Odysseus drew a second arrow. He turned toward Antinous, who was raising a golden two-handled cup of wine to his lips. The bowstring cracked. The arrow drove straight through Antinous' neck. The bronze point tore through his throat. The warlord dropped the golden cup. Thick, dark blood jetted over the roasted meat and the bread on the table. He collapsed, kicking the table over, dying in the spilled wine and the ruins of the feast he had stolen. The lords did not reach for their swords. They scrambled backward like terrified cattle, overturning tables and slipping in the sudden pool of wine and blood. They looked desperately to the walls for their spears, but the stone was bare. Telemachus had removed the weapons the night before. They pushed against the heavy oak doors, but the iron bolts held. There was no way out. "You dogs!" Odysseus roared, his voice echoing off the stone like thunder. "You thought I would never come home. You consumed my house. You forced my women. You wooed my wife while I still drew breath. You feared no god and you expected no consequence. Now the snare has closed." Eurymachus, a desperate and wealthy lord, tried to bargain. He blamed the dead Antinous for everything. He offered to repay the cattle, the bronze, the gold, with heavy interest. He tried to buy his life with silver. Odysseus looked at the terrified man. "If you gave me your entire inheritance, all that you own and all that you could borrow, I would not stay my hands. You have only one choice now. Fight or run." There was nowhere to run. Eurymachus drew a hidden bronze knife and charged. Odysseus shot him through the liver. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter in a sealed room. Odysseus stood on the raised threshold, raining arrows down into the panicked crowd. Men screamed, crawling under tables, using the bodies of their friends as shields. Telemachus fought beside his father, driving a spear through the back of a man who tried to rush the king. When the arrows ran out, they took up heavy spears and swords, hacking through the remaining lords in close quarters. The air grew thick with the smell of opened bodies, copper blood, and voided bowels. By the time the screaming stopped, the great hall was silent. 108 men lay dead, piled on top of each other in a grotesque, twitching heap. Odysseus stood in the center of the carnage, smeared in gore like a lion that had just fed on an ox. He ordered the unfaithful servants to be rounded up. There was no mercy. The treacherous goatherd Melanthius was dragged into the courtyard, mutilated with bronze knives, and left to bleed to death in the dirt. The unfaithful maids were forced to drag the corpses of their dead lovers out of the hall and scrub the thick blood from the stone. When the hall was clean, Telemachus strung the women up by their necks, a dozen of them kicking in the air like trapped birds until they strangled to death. Odysseus burned sulfur to purify the air of his house. The usurpers were dead, yet the king felt only a deep, hollow exhaustion. He climbed the stairs to the royal chamber, where Penelope had slept through the slaughter. When she finally looked at him, testing him one last time with a secret about their marriage bed, the truth broke her. They wept in each other's arms, but the king's eyes remained guarded. The house was his, but the blood on his floors was permanent. To the king, it felt like justice. To the island, it was a declaration of war. By dawn, the silence of the palace was broken. Carts carrying the bodies of the 108 lords rumbled back to their estates. The wailing of mothers and the furious screams of fathers echoed across the island. Odysseus had acted as a righteous king, but in the brutal logic of the ancient world, he had just committed an unforgivable crime. He had wiped out an entire generation of Ithaca's nobility. Every dead man had a father, a brother, or an uncle bound by sacred oath to avenge their blood. The slaughter in the hall did not buy peace. It triggered a blood feud that would tear the island apart. In the center of the town, Eupeithes stared down at the corpse of his son, Antinous. He traced the ragged, gaping hole where the bronze arrow had torn through the young lord's throat. When he looked up, the weeping stopped. There was only the cold, absolute demand for blood. He stood before a furious mob, holding his son's blood on his hands. If they let Odysseus live, he shouted, they would be cowards forever. The mob seized their bronze spears, strapped on their shields, and began the march toward the king's country estate. Odysseus was sitting with his elderly father, Laertes, when the news arrived. The king looked at his scarred hands. He was exhausted. He had fought 10 years at Troy. He had fought 10 years against the sea. He had just fought a desperate battle in his own home. And now, he had to fight the fathers of the men he had killed. There was no end to it. The old law of blood demanded that every corpse be paid for with another corpse, an endless chain of murder that would not stop until the island was empty. Slowly, the old King Laertes, the war-weary Odysseus, and the young Telemachus put on their battered bronze armor. 3 generations of one cursed family, preparing to kill their own countrymen. They walked out to meet the mob in the dirt of the country estate. For a long, terrible moment, the two sides stood in silence, waiting for the first drop of blood to fall. Then the mob roared, rushing forward. Laertes cast a spear, driving it through the bronze helmet of Eupeithes, killing the father just as Odysseus had killed his son. Odysseus raised his sword, preparing to sink back into the endless, grinding cycle of vengeance. Then, the sky split open. A blinding flash of lightning struck the dirt between the two armies, throwing earth and smoke into the air. The crack of thunder deafened them. Athena dropped from the sky, her voice echoing with the terrifying absolute authority of the divine. "Hold your hands," she commanded the people of Ithaca. "Shed no more blood. End this war." The fathers dropped their weapons in terror, turning to flee. Odysseus, consumed by the battle rage he had carried since Troy, let out a terrifying war cry and prepared to hunt them down. But Athena stepped in his path. She ordered him to stop. She commanded him to put away the sword, warning him that if he struck one more blow, he would draw the personal wrath of Zeus. Odysseus froze. He looked at the fleeing men. He looked at the heavy bronze in his hand. And slowly, heavily, the great king lowered his weapon. There was no final, celebrated victory. There was only the cold, absolute command of a goddess, forcing the swords back into their scabbards. The gods had to step in because the men of the heroic age could no longer stop themselves. The age of heroes did not end in a blaze of glory. It ended with a command to lay down the iron, to bury the dead, and to finally, mercifully, sit in silence. Subscribe to Mythkipedia and witness the true cost of the myths.